Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Tosfos Dibra Maschel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar Shneim Chulu. Let's begin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar Shneim Chulu. In the Gemara, we presented a Mishnah that had a machlekes between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. If there was a cup that had in it wine that was truma, and on top of it was floating oil that was truma, and a tvul yem touched the oil, the Rabbanon say that the oil is tamei and the wine is not tummy. Since we look at them as separate entities, only the oil was touched, only the oil becomes tummy. However, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that we look at the oil and wine as one entity, and therefore when the oil was touched, the wine also becomes tummy. So Tosfos is going to prove from here that we can see he's going to say that regarding the halachas of tumah, oil is considered a mashke, it's considered a liquid. So let's see the Tosfos inside. Midinaka tvul yem. From this that he referred to a tvul yem v'lei naka sheni, and he didn't refer to a sheni l'tumah. Why did the Tana choose to talk about a case where a tvul yem touched the oil? Why didn't he choose to talk about a case where a sheni l'tumah touched the oil? Because a tvul yem is one of the categories under sheni l'tumah. Sheni l'tumah is a general level of tumah, and one of the possible ways to be a sheni l'tumah is if one is a tvul yem. So the question is, why did the Tana choose to discuss a case where tvul yem touched the oil, and he didn't choose to discuss a case where any sheni l'tumah touched the oil? So it says Tosfos from this that he chose to talk about the tvul yem, and he didn't choose to talk about the sheni l'tumah. And this is in purple because it leads into something. Mashma, it leads to a conclusion. It seems the shemen choshev mashka, that oil is considered a liquid. How do we see that oil is considered a mashka, is considered a liquid by tumah? Because he's from this that he spoke about a tvul yem and he didn't speak about a sheni l'tumah. So now we'll present the proof. The sheni acher metame mashkin liyas tchila, because any other sheni will be metame mashkin to be a tchila. If oil, we're going to show how we would see the case if oil is a mashke and how we would see it if it's not a mashke. If oil is a mashke, we understand very well why we refer to a tvul yem and not any sheni l'tumah. Because a sheni l'tumah has the ability that when it touches a mashke, that mashke now becomes a rishon l'tumah. So if a sheni would have touched the oil, then also the Rabbanan would agree that the wine is tameh, since the oil, being a mashke, now becomes a rishon l'tumah with the ability to be metameh the mashke, the liquid that it's touching, which is the wine. So everybody would agree that it's tameh. However, since we're referring to a tvul yem is distinct from any other sheni l'tumah in that it doesn't have the power to make a mashke a rishon l'tumah. And therefore, by a tvul yem, when he touches the oil does not become a rishon l'tumah. And as a result, if we say that the oil and wine are separate, only the oil will become tummy and not the wine. It's only if we say that the oil and wine are one entity that they both will become tummy. So then it makes sense to us, being that oil is a mashke, we could only speak about a tvul yem and not a sheni l'tumah. Since by a sheni l'tumah, everybody would agree that the oil and the wine is tummy. It's only by a tvul yem that we would have an argument. However, if oil is not a mashke, then we don't have to refer specifically to a tvul yem. We could also refer to any sheni l'tumah, because since oil is not a mashke, when a sheni l'tumah touches something which is not a mashke, it doesn't become a rishon l'tumah. It just goes down one level, and therefore it'll come out that they could also argue in that case. The Rabbanan would say only the oil is tameh. Since the oil and wine are separate entities, the oil became tameh, the wine did not. And since the oil is not a mashke, it did not get elevated to a rishon l'tumah with the ability to make tameh the wine. So it'll come out that the oil is tameh, not the wine. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri would say that since the oil and wine are viewed as one entity, they both become tameh. So if oil is not a mashke, they could have argued not just by a tvul yem, but also a sheni l'tumah. So we'd have a question: why did the Tana refer to a tvul yem who touched the oil and not any sheni l'tumah? Therefore, we have to conclude, or we could conclude from here, from this that he spoke specifically about a tvul yem and not a sheni l'tumah, that oil is a mashke. Because now it makes sense. We could only talk about a tvul yem, only then would they argue, but not if we're talking about a sheni l'tumah who touched the oil, because then they would not argue. And now Tosfos just completes this idea. He says, "V'chein mashma beperakama de psachim." This is also indicated that oil is a mashka. It also seems to be the case in the first parak of Psachim, Umasha Kashim Imenachis, and then Tosfos completes it further and says, in this that there's a difficulty on saying that oil is a mashka from the Gemara in Mesachtas Menachos, Pirashti Sham B'Psachim. I already explained over there in Mesachtas Psachim. So it comes out from Tosfos. Tosfos' main focus was to bring out how we could prove from here that oil is a mashka. And what we got out of it is that we understand why the Tan and the Mishnah referred specifically to a tvul yem who touched the oil and not to any sheni l'tumah who touched the oil.